Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Talk of the Town podcast. If you have not already, make sure to hit that subscribe button, as we're now on the road to 400 subscribers here on the YouTube channel. If you love sports content, sports talk, anything from sports betting to updated rankings every week, it's all right here on the Talk of the Town podcast. And here today, we do have a special segment called Why Not Wednesday, where I answer any questions you guys have for me right here on the podcast. If you want your questions answered here, every Wednesday, make sure to hit at Talk of the Town _pod on Instagram, TikTok, here in the YouTube comments if you'd like it. It doesn't really matter to me. And you'll get your questions answered here on the pod every Wednesday. So let's get into the first question here today. It says, "Hey man, I'm a diehard Dallas sports fan, and I know you love talking football and basketball, but here's one thing I'm just besides myself with. How is Klay Thompson so bad now?" In all caps, by the way. He said that in all caps. "I was so hyped for him to be a Maverick, and he's just costing us what feels like so many games, especially to start the season." Well, one thing with Klay is he's now like dating Megan Thee Stallion. And I've noticed this is a trend with players kind of in the twilight of their career, especially, I mean, he's older now. I think he's in his late 30s now, or at least in his mid 30s. Clay's been washed for the last couple of years anyway. But these players kind of in the twilight years of their career, kind of start finding other things outside of basketball. They know, or they know like, um, their championship days are over. I mean, he's never going to have a period in his life where that Golden State dynasty is ever going to come back. Dallas isn't going to have it. Golden State certainly isn't going to have it anytime soon. Golden State may compete for a championship this year, but in terms of having that dynasty, being in your prime athletically, that's gone for Klay Thompson. He'll never get that back. But and he knows that. And those kind of players in the twilight of their careers, especially, I think Klay's been really single most of his career. I don't know if he's ever even been married in the first place, especially because, as I mentioned, he's dating Megan Thee Stallion now, and stuff like that. Those guys, when they're not necessarily, their focus isn't all 100% on basketball anymore, when they start kind of finding some other stuff outside of basketball, it kind of distracts them from their game a little bit. Like Klay, I can guarantee you, is not 100% focused on the court. And meanwhile, he's not out there purposely throwing games or playing like garbage on purpose or anything. I'm not saying that. But he's just not fully in it anymore. I guarantee you, especially he knows it athletically. He's just clearly not the same player as he's been. I've seen his numbers, actually seen it last night. I don't have it pulled up here, but I think he's averaging like 8 points a game. His shooting percentages are just terrible. Everywhere you look, Klay just declines every year. Even from last year, when he didn't have the greatest year on Dallas. He's definitely nowhere near the same player he's been 4 or 5 years ago. But they kind of figured he'd get to Dallas, play besides Luka when he was there. But I don't think anyone foreseen Luka getting traded last year at all. But even though they have Cooper Flag, he's playing besides Anthony Davis. Like, that team still has a ton of talent. Even though this team desperately needs Kyrie Irving, which I'll get to here in a few. But Klay's never really been a player to create his own shot in the first place. He's just kind of played off screens, catch and shoot next to Steph Curry. That's why they were the Splash Bros. If anyone tries to argue that Klay Thompson was better than Steph Curry at any point, then I don't know what to tell you. But Klay's probably going to go in the Hall of Fame. I'm sure he is. And he's one of the greatest shooting guards to ever play the game. Very unique in terms of his skill set. I mean, one of the greatest 3-point shooters ever. I'd probably say the next to Ray Allen, like him and Ray Allen are pretty neck and neck in terms of the greatest 3-point shooting two guards ever. If you wanted to put Harden in there as well, I mean, Harden is actually kind of creeping up on Curry in terms of the all-time 3-point shooting list. Like, he's not that far behind him. If Harden plays more years than Curry, then low-key Harden might be able to pass Curry in terms of that. Now, we know Steph Curry's the greatest 3-point shooter ever, but in terms of two guards, like, Klay is definitely one of, if not the greatest 3-point shooter. I'd probably have Ray Allen ranked a little higher. Like, him and Klay are neck and neck, but that's my personal opinion. But Klay's never been able to create his own shot. He's just kind of catch and shoot, just get the ball out of his hands really quick. He's a very unique player. And that's why I thought personally Klay, in terms of this fit in Dallas, playing what was supposed to be next to Luka, and Kyrie Irving, I thought the fit would actually be really good. You have two primary ball handlers that would be able to get all the attention. Now, obviously, Kyrie isn't playing this year, and Luka's been gone from Dallas for about a year now. He got traded back in January to LA, so it's been about a year since he's played in a Mavericks uniform. And this team desperately needs Kyrie Irving back, like really bad, because it would draw a lot of attention off of Klay. Like D'Angelo Russell, I think he had like 31 points the other night or something, but then he had like 2 points a couple of nights before that. He's an extremely inconsistent player, and that's what the Lakers just ended up shipping him off. The Lakers tried to make it work, and really, ever since that 2019 year in Brooklyn for D'Angelo Russell, he kind of just hasn't really done much his whole career. Like, he's been good. He has been a good player, but in terms of being an all-star caliber player, he just has never really seen that kind of peak play in his career, at least. He's an extremely inconsistent player. And D'Lo does draw attention, but he's not going to draw the attention Kyrie Irving does. I mean, Kyrie really, when you look at his skill set as a player, him and Allen Iverson are kind of like, that kind of set of player. In terms of just being the ball handler, being just very crafty. There's not a lot of players like Kyrie. Maybe you could argue Kyrie's the best at what he does. In terms of, I'd say he's probably the best ball handler to ever play the game. He draws a ton of attention because you can't guard Kyrie Irving one-on-one. I'd be interested to see how Kyrie plays when he comes back from his injury. He's supposed to be back maybe in January or February, apparently, which is pretty late in the season. And the Mavericks are not off to a hot start, as you mentioned, with Klay and everything. And as I was mentioning in the beginning of the video, with these players in the twilights of their career, with Megan Thee Stallion, he's dating her now and everything. These players kind of become celebrities as well. And one of the things is like, yeah, they're technically already celebrities. He's a very famous athlete, played on some of the best years in Golden State in the 2010s and everything. They ended up winning a championship a few years ago, back in 2022 again. It was their last championship together, him and Steph. So he has a lot of clout. He's very popular as it is. He's very famous. But I always say it's very different in terms of being a celebrity and a famous athlete. Technically, yeah, they're celebrities, but I just still think it's very different. They have a wide fan base, but it's just in terms of being an athlete. Like, sports fans very much recognize Klay Thompson, but anyone else outside of that doesn't really care, to be honest with you. But when you kind of get with people like Megan Thee Stallion, like I'd say the same thing about like Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift. Now, Taylor Swift is way more popular than Megan Thee Stallion is. But, these players, when they get with them, they turn into kind of celebrities in their field as well. Like Megan, she's a celebrity. She's very famous. Not quite, as I mentioned, as the level of like a Taylor Swift or something like that, but there's not very many people that are. Taylor Swift is a freaking billionaire for one as well. She can draw attention from men and women in terms of, her music. Hell, I used to listen to some of Megan's music, Hell, I ain't afraid to admit it. It wasn't that bad. She gets recognition from men and women. Where Klay, for the most part, gets recognition just from, he'll get recognition from women, but mainly they're kind of sports fans, whatever it is. But he's mostly a male famous athlete. Like a lot of males know of Klay Thompson. But, a lot of male and females know about Megan. Well, now he's getting the mix of both worlds in terms of, everyone listens to music, and most people listen to music. Pretty much everyone has listened to music in their life. Now, whether or not you listen to the same artist, obviously not. Not everyone knows Megan Thee Stallion, but Klay is in that world now. Like his mind is in another place than just basketball, and I think that in terms comes in terms of his play as well. That he is also a celebrity off of the court as well. Now with the whole Megan thing and everything, world star, all these pages and news pages are posting him and their relationship. It's a different element than just being a famous athlete. So he's dealing with a bunch of things. His mind just isn't all the way on the court. That's what I said with Travis Kelce on the football field. Like his mind is just not entirely on the football field anymore. And those guys, in terms of being in their athletic peaks of their prime, it's just over. Like Kelsey's not the same player. Klay's not the same player. So their minds on a million different things right now. And as I was mentioning earlier with like Kyrie, Like, I'd be interested to see how Kyrie comes off of his ACL injury. I think he'll be around the same player, but whether or not he still has that burst, I want to see it. Like, their team is older. AD's getting older. Clay's obviously getting older. Kyrie's kind of getting older. He's definitely getting older. You know, you do have Cooper Flag. They do have, I think they have a pretty good center duo between Lively and Gafford. Those guys are still pretty young, but yeah, man, I just think Klay has now fallen into that celebrity trap. Like Kelsey's in, and you know, it's their lives. You know, if he, as long as he's happy, that's really what matters at his play on the court. To be honest with you, it's like I feel like a person's well-being, it's bigger than sports. Like I'd rather a person be happy off the court, you know, than them just be miserable on the court and off the court at the same time. Because if you're miserable off the court, you're going to be miserable on the court. But Klay's a very unique player. And this is why I thought like Klay would age a little better, to be honest with you, and he just hasn't. It's like he's never relied on his athleticism, creating shots. Kind of where I'm going to use this as an example, maybe like an Anthony Edwards, where like he is a very athletic player, very explosive, and he's turned actually out to be a very good 3-point shooter as well. But he relies a lot on his athleticism, and there's a ton of other players that do so, and like Klay just hasn't really. Like Klay's relied a lot on his shot, which is why I thought like, hey, he could play maybe into his very late 30s, maybe even early 40s if he really wanted to do so, and just be a reliable 3-point shooter. Well, the thing is when Klay's not reliable shooting from three, like he's just ass. He doesn't bring anything to the table. Like Klay's always been a great two-way player, and that's why I thought, hey, he'd be able to bring some defense to the two-guard position, which is very valuable in the NBA in terms of switching off of screens and stuff like that, and being able to bring some sort of consistent 3-point shooting, maybe. Again, he's never really been a great finisher at the rim and stuff like that, consistently at least. That's just never really been his game. And he's just aged very poorly. Like, he can't shoot. And if Klay can't shoot, he literally doesn't bring anything to the table. He's not a good passer. He just doesn't bring anything. He's just he's an extreme liability out there on the floor. So I think you're right. To this point, Klay is more of a liability than he is just being able to bring any sort of value to the court. And I think he has a lot on his mind in terms of now he's like a full-fledged celebrity, not quite as much as like a Travis Kelce. Like their story isn't as big as Kelce and Swift, but they're pretty big. I see them a lot on my feed together. News outlets post them, stuff like that. So, and he knows that and he sees it. So his mind's on a million different things now than just play on the court. He knows he's in his twilight years. And I think that in terms comes to affect Klay a lot in terms of his play. And I think Klay is done. I think he's going to have a hard time, maybe even next year. Like if he continues how he's playing right now, I don't see how he'll be on any team in like a year or two. Dallas might end up cutting bait with him next year. I don't know how long his contract is. I don't know if they signed him like 2, 3, 4 years. If it's a 2-year deal, I can imagine Klay Thompson will not be a Maverick next year. They'll end up cutting bait. So we're going to have to find out. But I do agree, like Klay is a massive liability on the court. He just doesn't really bring anything if he doesn't bring 3-point shooting to the table. Next question I have here is, with all of Philly's trades and pickups at or before the trade deadline, how serious do you take this team? Are they your favorites to win it all? #GoBirds. I definitely say they're up there in terms of my favorites. I actually do not have a favorite team to win the Super Bowl right now. I don't. At the beginning of the season, it was the Ravens. I thought the Ravens were going to win it all. The Ravens are definitely trending upwards, but I do not trust this team to win the Super Bowl. I don't even trust this team to win against Minnesota this week, coming up, to be honest with you. McCarthy didn't have a bad performance against the Lions last week. It wasn't great. He had a really good first half, couple of good quarters, but the second half, it was really just Aaron Jones out there just really making it happen. And that Minnesota defense put a lot of pressure on Goff. So I don't even know. I don't trust the Ravens beating any team right now, to be honest with you. I'm not trying to sound like a hater or anything, but that was my favorite. I don't have a favorite to win right now. I love the Seahawks in the NFC. I love the Rams right now. Even though the Eagles did go on and beat the Rams, but we'll definitely have to see here going forward, whether or not the Eagles. I do have some concerns with the Eagles. Like, their offense to me is very inconsistent. I do like Jalen Hurts. Like, you look at Jalen Hurts' numbers, it's like, dude, this guy's been a great passer in the league, but you just do the eye test. This team has a lot of dead drives. But here's the thing, though. They're undefeated when they give Saquon the ball 15 or more times a game. And I think they really rely heavily on Saquon Barkley. And I think as long as Saquon plays well, they hand him the ball. And Kevin Patullo, kind of finds his groove in terms of calling the offense. I would say this team is the favorite to win the NFC. I do like the trade for Jalen Phillips out of Miami. They traded for Michael Carter. They had some trades earlier in the season for like Ted Bigsby. So I think this team does make all the right moves. And I think in Jalen Phillips for a third-round pick is a steal. I think you can only hope your third-round pick turns out to be half as good as Jalen Phillips. Of course, there's some concerns with him. Like, he is a very injury-prone player. Jalen Phillips is pretty much his entire career has been negated by injuries. So they have to keep him healthy. That's a risk. There is a risk there. If he was a guy who was very reliable out there on the football field, like this guy's maybe had missed a couple of games his whole career, I'd rank the trade even higher. But, I don't necessarily trust him to stay on the field, especially because Philly's defense plays very hard. Like, Vic Fangio coaches a hard-hitting defense, which I think could lead to some more injuries for Jalen Phillips potentially. He's going to be taking a lot of snaps. There's a lot expected out of him. Coming from a team that really, they don't have a hard-hitting defense. Miami's defense is pretty soft. Miami's team is just soft in general right now, to be honest with you. So, while he was out there, I'm sure, giving 100%, it's a different element in Philly. So there's a little bit of concern there with that trade that I think isn't necessarily quite being talked about in terms of his injury. But as long as he stays healthy, he stays on the field, that is a massive trade for Philly and their defense, which I think their defense has had some holes this year. I think, they're definitely missing some guys that they had last year on their team. I thought, for one, that they weren't going to have Zach Bond. I thought he was definitely going to walk in free agency last year or after they won the Super Bowl last year. And I thought there was no chance Zach Bond was going to be on Philly, but they still have him. I don't know how he's necessarily doing statistically. I don't know if he's quite having the year he did last year, but just having him on the team in general is just huge. Trading for Jair Alexander, that's a big trade as well. Whether or not he still has that juice he's had in previous years, he's been a healthy scratch for Baltimore now most of the season. So I don't really know what you're getting with Jair Alexander. I don't think anyone knows. If you can get any sort of form he was in Green Bay. Again, John Harbaugh has his doghouse of players. So I don't really know if Jair Alexander is washed or not. He wasn't great when he was playing, but he's been in Harbaugh's doghouse. He's been a healthy scratch. So maybe Philly and Vic Fangio can get something out of him. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of Baltimore schemes, but I guess we'll just have to find out. I say they're definitely favorites in the NFC. In terms of winning it all, I don't know if I'd necessarily feel comfortable. I think they're up there. They're high up. They're like top 3 to win it all. But I don't feel comfortable, not just with Philly, but with any team in the NFL right now saying, I feel comfortable with this team winning it all. And it's just, every team feels neck and neck. They do. Dallas had some big trades yesterday, which, again, I don't think they're really going to be anywhere near Philly, but they're going to be a lot more competitive than what they have been. That Philly and Cowboys game at the beginning of the year, that was the first game of the year. Philly almost lost that game. So, and now, they have a pass rush. They got some players. We know the Dallas offense is explosive. So, Philly coming off of a couple of really good wins for their bye week this week or last week. But, I not just Philly, but I don't feel comfortable saying any team's my favorite right now, to be honest with you. But they definitely did make some really good pickups at the trade deadline. And, of course, Philly has always been a threat the entire season, but I'd say even more so, especially if they can get juice out of Jair Alexander, play next to Mitchell and DeJean. That's going to be a hard secondary to throw on, their pass rush. They've just been dealing with some injuries, especially on their offensive line. I think this was a much-needed bye week for Philly. Again, as long as they can run with Saquon, keep pounding the ball out with Saquon Barkley. Again, they're undefeated when he has 15-plus carries. This team will be very good heading forward. So I guess we'll see there. Next question I have here is Texans fan here. What do we do with CJ Stroud? Is he really worth $250 million? Is he really worth $250 million? Do we invest in someone else? and try again. My hands are tied here, LOL. I think the problem you run into with that is like, you look at Trevor Lawrence's contract, you look at Tua's contract, you can't justify not paying CJ Stroud that much money. I'd say he's way better than Tua, even though he's not having the best year of his career right now. Or CJ Stroud isn't having the best year of his career right now. I mean, neither is Tua. Tua is by far having the worst year of his career right now. He's horrible. He might end up getting cut this offseason. Trevor Lawrence, it's been disappointing. I mean, he has not lived up to that generational prospect whatsoever. He's just very inconsistent. You look up, he just doesn't really bring any juice to Jacksonville at all, to be honest with you. He's just very monotone, just kind of out there, hey, whatever. Just doesn't bring any juice to the organization. He's just kind of out there. And his play is, again, kind of like his personality, just very mediocre on the field, extremely mediocre. So, if you want Stroud, you're going to have to pay him that amount of money. He's won a couple of playoff games. He's won more playoff games than Trevor and Tua and Kyler Murray. Like, you look at these guys' contracts, they don't have a choice. And while CJ Stroud's having a down year, it's not his fault. I mean, he just took a pretty nasty injury against the Texans. I don't know where he stands in terms of concussion protocol, whether or not he's going to play this upcoming week or not, but he took a nasty hit against the Broncos last week or on Sunday. So I don't know where he stands in terms of the upcoming weeks, whether or not he'll play this week. I haven't really kept up with CJ Stroud's injury status here this upcoming week. But in terms of their future, you have to think of it like this upcoming quarterback class, like, just cut. Like, honestly, I wouldn't trust any of these guys to lead my franchise at all. Definitely, if CJ Stroud was coming out of this class, he would be the number one pick by a mile right now. It wouldn't even be close. I mean, I know Fernando Mendoza, there's still some question marks with him. Like, do we really want to hand our keys to this guy? You're going to have teams like New York and maybe even Tennessee could be looking to move off of Cam Ward. You never know. You don't. Guys aren't afraid to move off of these top picks. They made it known the last few years. So, if they really feel comfortable drafting some of these top guys, teams are going to move off of their QBs. And I don't think the Texans are going to do so. Like, CJ Stroud's won them a couple of playoff games. And I'd say probably in their franchise's history, he's their best quarterback. I know Deshaun Watson had those couple of years of being fantastic, but in terms of longevity, I know CJ Stroud's only been there like 3 years now. But I think in terms of just being their long-term answer at quarterback, he is by far their best shot. And Houston's been looking for a quarterback forever, which is what they thought they had in Watson, but then he turned out to be a damn, really just weirdo, big-time weirdo. And, that obviously didn't work out. And Watson just hasn't worked out at all in the NFL so far, especially with Cleveland and everything. Who the hell knows what is going on there? But I'd say Stroud's their best shot. And I do think, their offensive line stinks. Like, their offense has a lot of issues. Like, this just goes beyond Stroud. And when he has time to throw and their offense, their offensive line's kind of clicking, he looks fantastic. I've watched him all this year. I mean, he looks fantastic when he has time to throw. But when he's sitting there just getting the shit beat out of him, he doesn't even have 2 seconds to throw the football. I don't care if you put Mahomes, Allen, when Mahomes even takes, I think when he gets hit 7 times a game, they haven't won a game. When he's under duress, the Chiefs look like a completely different franchise. They're not even in the playoff picture right now. So it goes to show you, no matter who you have back there, if your offensive line play is playing like ass, you are going to suck. Your team around you is going to fall apart. And Houston's defense is a championship-level defense. I think they have the best defense in the NFL, even with Denver. I really do. I think Houston's defense, even though their record is not very good, their defense shuts anyone down. They are an incredible unit. They really are. So it's just their offense is holding it back, and I don't necessarily think it's CJ Stroud's fault. Now, they don't have a choice. You look at the QB market. Lawrence, Kyler Murray, Tua had destroyed the market. So, and Stroud is not going to want to sit there. He's a nice guy. He's a Christian guy. He loves, whatever it is. He is a very, loving person. He's a good person. That's all around the franchise what they say about CJ Stroud. He's a great guy to be around in the locker room. But just like anyone else, he's going to want his money. He's going to want to get paid. He's not going to sit there and take 180 mil, 200 mil. And he's going to say, screw that. I've won 2 playoff games for this franchise who's been nothing but just trash, for a majority of the franchise. You had a couple years with Matt Schaub, a couple years with Deshaun Watson, but before you guys were nothing. I've come in here my first 2 years and won a couple of playoff games. Like, I'm going to get paid, and they're not going to have a choice. And honestly, quite frankly, I don't blame them. Do you want to be stuck in quarterback purgatory and be looking for a quarterback? That's what the Jags are kind of in right now. It's like, if they were to cut bait with Trevor Lawrence, like, okay, well, what are we going to do now? We haven't had a quarterback really our entire franchise's existence. And that's really kind of been the same with the Texans, besides Deshaun Watson, who obviously didn't end up working. What are we going to do if we cut C.J. Stroud? Like, is there really a better option? No. I think C.J. Stroud's going to get paid, and it's going to be a lot of money. It's going to be at least over $220, $230 million. You look at the corners getting paid, the pass rushers getting paid, obviously the quarterbacks get paid in a different realm than the pass rushers, the corners, and those guys do, but he's going to get paid. He's going to get paid a lot of money, and I think respectfully so, but they've got to invest in an offensive line. I don't care who you have back there. I think Stroud, he hasn't necessarily lost anything. I don't think he's lost any juice. I thought it was kind of alarming a few weeks ago. I guess it was about a month ago at this point. I think it was before the Ravens game. He said, yeah, I feel like I'm getting old. Like, I just don't feel like I move how I used to move. And I was like, dude, you're like 23 years old. I'm going to be 22 in a month. And I'm like, dude, if you're feeling like that, I'm kind of scared. You're like a professional athlete. You're supposed to be in tip-top shape. I'm sitting here eating little mini chocolate chip cookies at 3 a.m. and that's my breakfast. You're sitting here eating meals made by private chefs and shit. Like, what do you mean you don't feel good? I don't know. So I think they have to pay him. I don't think they have a choice, to be honest with you. I think, do they want to be stuck in quarterback purgatory with, you look at the college football recruiting classes, it's like, do you trust any of these guys to fill his spot and win a couple of playoff games? No, I don't. I mean, Mendoza, again, probably going to come out to be the number 1 pick. You have Dante Moore, Lenore Sellers, who I think Lenore Sellers has legit potential to be a top 10 quarterback. I just think South Carolina's roster just isn't worth a damn. But I think I just don't really think they have a choice. And I think respectfully so, they've got to pay him, and they're going to have to pay him a lot of money. So I guess we'll just have to see what the future holds. But I think he's going to be a Texan for a long time. Next question I have here is, I'm glad the Dolphins finally cut ties with Chris Grier. It was time. Between the bad drafts and just dysfunctional contracts and hirings, this was a long time coming. Thoughts? I don't know too much about Chris Grier, to be honest with you. I know he's been there since 2016, so, I mean, obviously I've known the Dolphins for that long. I've been a football fan my whole life. But, I don't know. Wait, what I mean by, like, I don't know Chris Grier that much is, like, I just don't know him, like, personally, like, how he is around the players, the team. I can't speak for him on that standpoint, but in terms of the decisions he's made, the Dolphins just have went nowhere. And I think what really was a nail in the coffin for Chris Grier, to be honest with you, and a lot of his decision-making, his contracts, is right now the way Tua's playing. And I think a lot of that has to do with, like, Tua's concussions. Like, I think a lot of it has just gotten to him. And quite frankly, the team built around him, which a lot of it has to do with Chris Grier, just isn't worth a damn. It sucks. His roster sucks. So I think even besides Tua and the Mike McDaniel contract extension, like, you just look around and it's like, oh, God, these decisions they made. They traded a plethora of first-round picks that they had for Tyreek Hill, for Bradley Chubb, that it just hasn't worked. And they tanked for Tua. That draft pick just hasn't really worked, to be honest with you. I think people make it seem a lot worse than it really is. Like, he was the passing yards leader. They had a offense that put up 70+ points at one time. Like, they had a point where, like, this Dolphins team was really good for a couple of years. So I don't, and that was with Tua. So I don't necessarily think the Tua draft pick was as bad as people are going to make it seem, to be honest with you. I know with Jordan Love and Justin Herbert, like, you look at those guys and it's like, how could you justify drafting Tua over those guys? And I get it in hindsight. Like, now it's like, how could you imagine? But Tua had some pretty good years. Now, athletically, he's not anywhere near Jordan Love or Justin Herbert. But you have to remember when those guys were drafted in 2020, like Herbert was kind of a project coming out of Oregon. Like he was a big time, athletic quarterback, a massive dude, but a lot of them kind of seem to be as like mechanical. Like, can this guy really work to be a great passer in this league? Like, we don't know, to be honest with you. They just kind of see him as mechanical and like this guy's kind of stiff. Do we really trust him? We know he's big, he's athletic, he has a huge arm, but kind of turnover prone. Like, do we really trust Justin Herbert? And obviously the Chargers did. Chargers went and drafted him, and it's worked out to be fantastic. Like Jordan Love, if he didn't get drafted behind Aaron Rodgers, which he shows a lot of similarities to Aaron Rodgers, who, guess what, sat behind Brett Favre, who Aaron Rodgers has a lot of similarities to Brett Favre. Not a lot. He's not nearly as turnover prone as Brett Favre was. But in terms of that gunslinger, kind of just heave it down the field, ridiculously accurate. Like, yeah, he got to sit behind Aaron Rodgers for a few years. Like if Jordan Love was drafted to Miami with Brian Flores and sit behind Ryan Fitzpatrick and a shit team, would Jordan Love really be a good quarterback? Honestly, probably not. He was a massive project quarterback. So I don't necessarily blame Chris Grier and the Dolphins for drafting Tua. Like Tua was seen, he had that hip injury and all, which seems like it was forever ago. He did have some injury concerns coming out of Alabama, but it was like, this guy seems surefire. And he looked great to start off his career. It looked like he was really going to turn the Dolphins around. And they were turned around for a while. Like the team looked fantastic. But, the last couple of years has just not looked great for Tua and Chris Grier. They went all in. They traded, as I mentioned, for Tyreek Hill, Bradley Chubb. They had the Legion of Zoom for a while, where their offense was just flying everywhere. They had Raheem Mostert, Jalen Waddle. Everywhere you looked, it was just massive 40-yard plays down the field, and Tua was just bombing the ball down the field. They were just making massive plays, and there was contentions for Miami to be the number one seed. But as that fell apart, and Tua's been falling apart, and Tyreek Hill now with all these injuries, and Tua now with the injuries, it's just went in the other direction for Chris Grier. And the Mike McDaniel situation, it's just fallen apart for Miami. It has, and it just hasn't necessarily looked great for him. And they're just going to cut ties and cut the whole thing and restart. I think there's going to be a full-scale rebuild with the Miami Dolphins, and I think it's showing now I think they're going to cut with Tua. That was the guy Chris Grier and them drafted. Again, Tyreek Hill, they're going to end up cutting bait with him with that massive injury. Mike McDaniel's getting it fired. So I think they're just going to wipe the slate clean. And, I do understand. And that goes to show you that the whole thing is going to be wiped clean. They're going to want to draft their guy. I don't know who they're going to draft, whether or not they draft high enough to get Mendoza, did they want to take a chance on Lenore Sellers, Dante Moore, Ty Simpson, whoever it is, they're going to draft a quarterback this year. They are. So we'll see. But I don't necessarily blame them if they're going to go for a full-scale rebuild, which is what it's looking like here. And, I think they might end up cutting ties with Jalen Waddle. I think this whole thing is about to blow up in Miami this upcoming year. And, if they're going to do so, it looks like they're going to do it now, and they're doing it the right way. So, yeah. Last question I have here today. You said anything could be asked, right? Well, I definitely need suggestions on a good TV series, particularly on Netflix. I just bought a subscription a few days ago and have never watched any of the series on here. It would be much appreciated, bro. Okay, so this is actually kind of coming from the perfect person here to be able to give you advice on watching TV series, especially on Netflix, because I'm a massive Netflix guy, especially over the last couple of years. I'm not a massive Netflix guy at all. Like, people will go on Netflix and literally watch every single documentary that gets released on the same day, watch all the shows. I'm not anywhere near a massive Netflix guy, so actually that's not true. But, in terms of coming from a guy who doesn't necessarily watch a lot of TV, I'm not too intrigued by TV, but I tell you one thing I'm intrigued by: documentaries and TV series on Netflix, because Netflix does it right in terms of the one I've watched. If you've never watched... I'll give you some documentaries, especially the ones I've watched recently. I watched one over the weekend. And I don't know if you have a girlfriend or not, but if she loves watching documentaries, watching TV shows, then I'm the perfect guy for you, because my girlfriend loves, she does. She gets me hip to a lot of these documentaries, a lot of these TV series on Netflix, and even just beyond Netflix. But You're asking Netflix, and that's the main one we watch. So one of the ones I watched the other day was American Murder, the Family Next Door. That was one of the documentaries I watched. That was pretty good. Now they're all sad as hell, of course. It's not good in terms of saying what happens, but in terms of just an interesting watch, I do love true crime documentaries. I don't know if you do as well. Let me give you a TV series. I have two of them. I haven't watched very many on Netflix, but Stranger Things obviously is a massive one. Season 5 comes out in a couple of weeks, which is the last season of the show. I highly suggest starting to watch that as I upload. If you watch this video, as I upload it today or whenever you watch it, starting that now. I really do, because it takes a long time. It actually doesn't take a long time to finish it all. You can knock it out within a week or so of if you watch like consistently, like a couple episodes a day, you can knock it out in like a couple of weeks. So, and you'll be in perfect time to be like, hey, I am so ready to watch season 5, because season 4 ends off on like a crazy like hellscape. I'm not going to necessarily spoil it, but it is very, very interesting to watch. So I definitely suggest Stranger Things. What my favorite show ever I've watched is Stranger Things, and I don't even really get into shows like. I'm not a guy who watches TV series like Chicago PD, SWAT. Like, I don't necessarily watch those. I've never watched an episode of those. I don't necessarily enjoy watching it. So, I love Stranger Things. That's a TV series to really watch. One of the ones I watched that was kind of like a mini series, was The Watcher. I really like that as well. Again, it kind of had like some of its corny moments, but it was really interesting. It's actually based off of a true story. I think it was just like 8 or 9, like 10 episodes or something like that. It happened like 6 years ago, and I think it was in New Jersey. I was this family that was getting weird letters in the mail from like this family that, and mind you, the person's never been found. So that's a really interesting. I'm trying to not spoil it for you. So, again, The Watcher is definitely an interesting watch as well. As I mentioned, based off a true story from a few years ago. Stranger Things, as I mentioned just now previously. All of Us Are Dead is one I watched a few months ago. It's kind of just like this apocalyptic, like these. I think it takes place in Korea. Yeah, I think it does take place in Korea, in Seoul. Or I think it's actually next to Seoul. They're not trying to get it to spread out or something like that. It's like the zombie apocalypse. It takes place in like a high school and stuff like that. And there's like a season 2 coming out next year or something like that. I thought it was pretty interesting. I thought it was a good watch. Got me pretty interested as well. What's the other one? Some of the true crime documentaries, though, which is what I watch a lot of on Netflix as well. As I mentioned, what's one I just mentioned? The Family Next Door, the Lacey Peterson true crime documentary. There was one. It's not necessarily true crime, but it's pretty crazy. It's went viral recently. I think it's called like The High School Catfish. Dude, that is a wild watch. Like, that is definitely a watch worth watching. So that's just a couple of my suggestions. Again, I haven't watched like too much. What was the one my girlfriend had me watch? It was like a year ago or so. It was like this elevator, and it had like this food on it, and it was like I don't know. I'm gonna have to mention it in a later video, or I'll just text you it back. Actually, hold on, let me look it up real quick. Netflix, because it is really crazy. Netflix elevator. Yeah, hold on, let me see. What is it called? Oh, it's called The Platform. That is one that is like, it is a really strange watch, but it is really interesting. That's what I suggest giving a watch to as well. It's like, there's like hundreds of stories, and it's just this platform that goes down, and it's these people that live on different sections, and it goes up and down, and it has a bunch of food, and they say to preserve the food and keep like one meal for each person on every platform. And then, I don't know, you have to watch it. It is very interesting to watch. So that's just some of my suggestions. The Platform, Lacey Peterson documentary, Stranger Things, The Watcher, All of Us Are Dead. I'm sure there's a lot more, and I've watched a lot more. I just can't necessarily think of at the moment. But yeah, man, definitely those are some to watch. Very interesting. So that is it for today's video. Tomorrow, I'm grading all of the trades that happened during the trade deadline yesterday, so make sure to stay tuned for that if you're interested. If you've not hit that like button and that subscribe button, make sure to do so, especially if you like the videos. Any amount of support means a ton to me and the channel in general. And that is it for today's video, y'all. I'll see y'all tomorrow when I grade these players from the trade deadline. And yeah, take it easy.